Afternoon, evening, good morning. Welcome to Stupid versus the Spread. This is NFL Week 9 talk. We are in Week 9 of the NFL season. Midway point, I think, almost precisely for the most part. Um, Trade deadline was yesterday at noon Eastern or 2 p.m. Eastern, whatever it is. So we'll talk a couple trades that happened that were a little exciting, little after last minute detailed kind of thing, and then we'll get into this week's preview. Before we do that, we'll talk the most recent, arguably the biggest news of the week. Commanders owner Dan Snyder was reported to have hired Bank of America to examine selling the team either in partial ownership or in its entirety. Um, the news came out this morning. Snyder hired Bank of America. Um, I had assumed that was looking for minority stake owners because he does have a bit of debt tied to the team. But it was announced a couple hours ago that the Commanders anticipate, or at least Dan Snyder very seriously anticipates that a federal investigation has been opened up into um, allegations against him as during his time as owner of the team, specifically financial improper financial transactions, amongst other things. This not tied to the congressional inquiry um, that is tied to his name about his treatment of mostly female employees under his tenure as the owner. So I don't know if you have anything to add, Mike. I'm interested to see. Of note, no professional sports team has ever actually been required by a league to be sold. Even that NBA transaction a few years ago was technically voluntary, although they were highly hinting that they were going to make him sell. I forget his name. Not an
Uh,
NBA guy.
Donald Sterling.
Yes, but so in theory, this is of his own volition. Although I think Dan Snyder has been behind the scenes, highly pressured to sell the team, as we well know for many years, if not months. And I think the recent allegations against him have kind of shown that it's probably in the league's best interest. So I don't think there's any qualms with other owners stepping in and telling him he needs to sell the team. Of note, what was it, Jim Irsay of the Colts last week, mentioning that he thinks Dan Snyder should sell the team. Obviously, Colts and Commanders were playing each other that week, and um, you know, Irsay basically said in a presser he thinks Dan Snyder should not be a owner of a football team in the National Football League. I don't disagree with that statement. But it'll be interesting to see how the next couple of weeks turn out. Obviously, the franchise itself is valued at about $5 to $6 billion, so you need to find people to actually have the money to front to pay that kind of cost. So it'll be interesting to see where this turns out. But a lot of Commanders fans, I can tell you, are pretty happy about the news. So we'll see how this goes. But yeah, for the first time in a very long time, I think since the expansion, we will have the sale. Well, Broncos aside, we will have a sale of a football team coming up. Anything to add to that, Mike? That's more of a soapbox for me.
Yeah, I'm sure you were happy today.
I was not disappointed. I was not
I'm
disappointed.
also I'm also happy because Dan Snyder's a bad person and should not have a football team. Um, and please, allegedly a bad person. Don't sue me. Um, I know he's a very active litigant. Um, no, I write for a sports law oriented blog called Conduct Detrimental. The two founders of that website have a couple episodes recently where they've broken down all of the legal issues that would go on with a forced sale and whether or not Dan Snyder's threats on dirt are real and what his potential federal lawsuits would look like. They broke down all that. There's about 2 hours of podcast covering that. If you go to Conduct Detrimental on wherever you get your podcasts, they also had on Seth Wickersham and the ESPN reporting team that broke the Dan Snyder dirt story. So a very really they are covering it from all angles. I'll pump them because I write for them as well. So
Yeah, I listened to
they,
that podcast actually. They did a great job breaking down everything.
yeah, and they are much more educated legal minds than I am one semester in a law school. Um, so listen to them. I will say that I think it is interesting to see how the league, what the league does with the Mary Jo White investigation. I think
Hmm.
that's an interesting angle of whether or not how quietly the NFL tries. Once that report is likely to never come out until after Dan Snyder sells the team. Now, depending on how quickly that sale happens, and I think they do everything possible to put that investigation as far under various shag and Afghan rugs, as many as they can
In the
find.
league office.
Yeah, and bury that investigation on like I wouldn't be surprised if it's 4th of July weekend at like 3 in the afternoon, or like whenever they do market research and find the most likely time for everybody to be watching fireworks, and then drop that news just to bury it, so that way they never have to talk about it again. Because I do think that lost in the shuffle of Dan Snyder actually selling the team is, and it's not going away. That the whole how that investigation unfolded and why there was never a written report, and then the verbal report, and we're going to reinvestigate and the congressional stuff and all of the stuff that we were talking about as to why Dan Snyder actually should have been removed in the first place goes away once he sells the team. I think the key to that not going away is that John Gruden is still suing the NFL.
And
That
has gotten
he has
rulings.
gotten he has gotten past a prima facie showing of a complaint to survive a motion to dismiss, which means that he'll be able, assuming the NFL loses on appeal, which they've appealed. Um, if they lose that appeal, he'll get to discovery, and we may ultimately find out how the emails got out, which may eventually lead us to some of the power politics behind the curtain at the league office and with the NFL to see if there's anybody who's still in the league that was either aware of what was going on and did nothing, or was actively helping Dan Snyder hide it, which I think is the interesting angle for the NFL once Dan Snyder leaves. So that's the only thing I'll add.
It wouldn't shock me if Jerry Jones was one of those helping him. I Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think that the legalities of it have piled up against Snyder, and he is now cutting bail or cutting rope and getting the hell out of Dodge. I don't think that's a bad call on his part. Um, I do
Yeah,
agree. It'll be interesting to see. I think they'll wait till the next president dies and then just like slip that in a press release, like, "Oh, hey, it's we released the findings."
yeah, exactly.
Like
Yeah,
they will,
they'll wait
or
till
it'll never see the light of day, and they'll
yeah,
find some way to
they'll
hide
wait
it.
till not Russia nukes Ukraine and say, "Oh, by the way, Dan Snyder did harass that person."
Yeah, exactly. More
Yeah,
than
no,
likely.
it's they're the best at just dropping news bombs, like as trying to bury them as far away from the spotlight as possible. They do it probably better than anybody currently doing PR. Oh
Don't
no,
disagree.
The only other thing I think was an interesting angle too that Florio brought up was that I think as big a factor as the criminal investigation and financial improprieties, maybe I think the reality that Dan Snyder was never going to get a stadium built in the DMV probably had as much to do with this, and him coming to the realization of that fact probably had as much to do with this as the criminal and the sexual harassment investigations.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think without that, he was never going to survive as owner. Um, because purely from a financial perspective. So I think all that adds up. He didn't really have an option other than
Yeah,
sell.
special shout out to all the people in the politicians in DC who are like, we're just gonna keep RFK and not do anything with it, and then it catches fire every fucking week. So go fuck yourselves. Okay, trade deadline talk. We'll stay out of politics. Trade deadline talk. A couple big moves. I think
A
everyone
lot of big
assumed that.
moves. Most
Yeah,
players
I think.
traded at the deadline in 30 years.
Yeah, it was
Um,
funny to see. Freezing Cold Takes, the Twitter account you definitely should be following if you love sports, did a classic where they basically, so they retweet, if you don't know the premise, they retweet like wrong takes, or like if a team was up 31-0 and then lost and everyone's like, oh yeah, this team that's losing sucks, they retweet them. It's fantastic stuff. Well, there was a bunch of NFL writers who were like, yeah, see, nothing happens at the NFL deadline. And then 48 hours before the deadline, chaos. So we'll start with Philly acquiring Robert Quinn. So we talked about this last week. There's buyers and sellers, right? So if you're a team that maybe doesn't think they're going to make it far in the playoffs, you're going to sell, i.e., get picks for your players. So the Eagles acquire Robert Quinn from the Bears, along with Roquan Smith, who the Bears traded away as
No,
well.
yeah,
So he
Rokon
didn't go
went.
to Philly, but the Bears traded him away.
Yes.
Um, so, I mean, Robert Quinn is a fantastic defensive end. Do you think? I mean, obviously this helps Philly. Do you think it's a marked improvement from where they were?
Yeah, I think so. I defensively, I think that's probably that's got to be the weakest part of their defense because their linebackers have been good. They're very good on the interior, and their secondary has been really good this year. Darius Slay has been very good when he was getting killed a couple years ago for how poorly he started his tenure in Philly. Um, so I think having a bona fide threat at pass rusher for their defense rounds out a team that's already very well rounded.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it helps them even more in games if their offense, which has shown no indication of slowing down, but if they do run into issues and they have to try to win a game defensively, I think he's a huge add for them.
Yeah, and it's not unheard of that the Eagles might have to do that. I think they're scoring. They've scored a lot, but they've also had 3 games where they scored under 25 points, which is not nothing in the NFL. 24 usually wins you a game, but certainly, adding that is another piece of the puzzle that they're really looking at. So Philly, I think, is now favored to win the NFC. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, as they
Yeah,
are both
they
undefeated
would
and
have to be. They
looking.
may even be. They're not going to be
I think they're
negative
second
money
behind the
to
Bills.
go undefeated, but their schedule right now, I think they're favored in every game they have left.
Correct. So we'll move on. T.J. Hawkinson was traded to the Vikings from the Detroit Lions. So it's not as common that you see it within your own division, but he is traded tight end out of Detroit down to Minnesota. Um, do you see Minnesota as like an outside perennial contender at this point? I mean, they're playing pretty good ball, and if you consider on any given Sunday that one thing can lead to another. Like, there's a chance that Minnesota is the number 2 seed coming out of the NFC if teams keep playing the way they're playing, and they might have a pretty straight shot to the NFC Championship game against the what we assume to be the Eagles at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're playing really well. And I have 2 words for you. Kirk Cousins. No, they're not an actual contender. Because Kirk Cousins is their quarterback, and
I'm
Kirk.
woke on this. I think Kirk has found a groove. I think there's something there. I really do.
Listen,
I
Kirk
think
hasn't
it.
played in primetime since the debacle in Philly. Wait till Kirk plays in primetime, and he's going to have to win games in the playoffs on his own, and he's not the quarterback that they need to do that. They have a very good offense around him. I think their defense is not good enough to keep them in the Kirk Cousins range. There's a range of outcomes where Kirk Cousins can win you a game, and then there's a range outside of that where Kirk Cousins has to go beat an offense that is very good on the other side of the field. And Kirk Cousins is not capable of doing that. He's not capable of beating an offense that's markedly better in a given game if his defense can get him 1 or 2 stops or a lucky turnover to win the game. He's not capable of doing it. He won't do it in the playoffs. They may finish the season very well. I don't think they're a legit contender. I think even if like a Arizona wasn't guaranteed to win that game, but they got the ball back late. And if they don't fumble that punt, that game's very interesting coming down the stretch. Kyler Murray was the better quarterback in that game and probably should have won it. His special teams let him down. I don't believe in Minnesota, not yet. They've got to beat somebody that I would consider to be a true, like a true bona fide playoff contender for me to start saying that Minnesota might have a chance. I'm not getting
So,
fooled by
like this week at the Bills.
no next week at the Bills.
Correct. Next week, the Bills.
Yeah.
So I will say this: the Vikings do have a hard schedule coming up. I think if the Vikings are a 12-win team, I think they do really have a chance. They're not playing the strongest of opponents outside of the next 3 weeks. Well, the Jets on in early December, but it'll be interesting to see where they wind up. I am more of a believer in Kirk Cousins than most. As at this point, having seen him play, I know he still struggles in prime time, but we'll see how it turns out. It should be interesting. Minnesota acquiring T.J. Hawkinson certainly helps. I would say that tight end was not their strongest position, so interesting to see. Next guy on the list, Roquan
Real quick,
Smith. Also,
just
oh yes,
just on my point, since they lost to the Eagles, they have beaten the Lions by 4, the Saints by 3, the Bears by 7, the Dolphins by 8. But that was without Tua,
Tua.
and then they beat the Cardinals by 8, and we just talked about what happened in that game. So if you add all that up, all of those teams, the Lions, the Saints, the Bears, and the Cardinals specifically, are not all they're middle of the pack to below average teams. And
Yeah,
coming up, they get the Bills, the Cowboys, the Jets, the Giants, uh, among those, and the Pats. If you want, because the Pats beat the Jets, so they get the Bills, Cowboys, Patriots, Jets. And then 2 weeks after that, they get the Giants. I'm not convinced that they're ready to be considered a legit playoff team, a legit playoff contender.
that's fair. Well, okay, so we'll moving on here. Baltimore acquires Roquan Smith from the Bears, who have very much been sellers and are very much advertising that they are sellers, which we'll talk about in a second. And acquire Roquan Smith. Obviously, if Baltimore has struggled in one specific area, it is absolutely on their fourth quarter performances, where they have blown multiple leads in all of their losses this year. Um, Roquan Smith, of note, 2 interceptions, 83 tackles, and 2.5 sacks so far midway through the season, which are phenomenal numbers for a linebacker. I, do you think this is the key that Baltimore's missing? Is there still more stuff that they might need to examine, kind of looking at the way things have fallen over the last couple weeks?
I don't think it's the guy they've been missing. I do think they got the best player at the trade deadline, and they didn't give up a first round pick to do it.
It's a good take.
Yeah. So Roquan's the NFL's leading tackler. I think he's a better player at his position than Bradley Chubb is at his position. And he's been much more consistently healthy. Um, so I think in that respect, it's a good trade for Baltimore. I think, you know, the Bears probably got what they could for him, considering he was never going to resign there. They didn't really have a lot of leverage there. So I don't
Yeah,
think
if I can interject here, of note, it was very well advertised at the end of training camp that they had tried to re-sign Roquan, and talks and dialogue had completely fallen off a cliff to the point where it was very well known he was not going to re-sign at the end of the year, and he would have become a free agent. So a lot of
and
Bears
they
fans
couldn't
were
tag
upset.
him. They
Right.
couldn't tag him the way that he found out about the Robert Quinn trade. Sorry, um, also exacerbated that even further.
Yep.
It's not a bad deal from the Bears' perspective. I think it's a good deal from Baltimore's perspective. I don't know that it makes how much better it makes them is the question, because I think in these fourth quarter games, their real issue has been their secondary and the way that their secondary is played, and Roquan Smith doesn't necessarily fix that. Maybe he helps keep you in games earlier in the first half, but
Hmm.
I think from just a talent perspective, compared to what they gave up, I think Baltimore made a really good trade here. And I think it's a good one for the Bears too. I don't think it looks as good when you consider how they turned around and got Chase Claypool, which we'll talk about in a bit. But I think overall this is a better trade for Baltimore than it is for Chicago. It's not necessarily a bad trade for Chicago.
I agree. Second to last team we'll talk about, Miami. Miami acquires two key players, Chubb and Wilson. Chubb from, and I'm looking this up right now.
NC State, I believe.
Yeah, he came out of NC State. He was on the Broncos. Um, I mean, of Chubb and Wilson, do you think either of these teams or do you think either of these players are like a significant add for Miami, or do we think like Tua being healthy is going to help more? Because I think,
I think
uh,
they both are. I
like,
really
I
do.
don't think I do too. So here's the thing. Miami's defense has not been great, and I think the addition of Chubb as pass rusher is awesome. But I don't know that it also is the reason that they would make the playoffs. I think they're going to already make the playoffs. I think they're going to make a deep run. Um, so I don't. On the defensive side of the ball, I don't know how much Chubb is going to help. Do you agree or do you disagree?
I I think he will help. I
That was
I
that
think
was a
that
word
they
milkshake that I did there. But my point is, I think
yeah.
Wilson probably is a better ad than Chubb, although I
Yes,
don't think
I
it's
don't disagree.
competition.
I don't disagree with that take, especially because Mike McDaniel gets a guy who's been in that offense before. I think that's the important part of this is that he gets a running back that he doesn't have to teach this system to, and he'll take over the backfield eventually for Miami, which I think is and it just gives them another guy to rotate in, which is a big deal for them.
Hmm.
Excuse me. Bradley Chubb, I think, gives them another bookend edge outside of was it Jalen Phillips is the guy who went to UCLA and
I believe so. Chubb
then
has 5.5 sacks in the season, so not terrible, but he only has 26 tackles, and he has no interceptions. So
yeah.
um,
I
two
I
forced fumbles, though. That's pretty good. Two
yeah,
forced
so
fumbles.
I think bookending him with Phillips with Christian Wilkins on the interior of that line makes their line much more intimidating. They already have two good corners, so I think that their defense does get a lot better here. I think the combination of these guys, if Miami can find the groove they were in the beginning of the season where they beat Buffalo, they dominated the Dolphins, and then came back in a pretty big way against the Ravens. If they can find that magic when they started 3-0 before the Tua hit. Um, I think they all of a sudden become a team sort of not exactly like the Bengals last year because I think we know how talented they can be, but they could be one of those as we look at teams that start to figure it out in the second half of the season the way that we've seen some other teams that have made deep runs in the playoffs do in the past few years. I think they are definitely a one of those keep your eye on what they do coming down the stretch here because their schedule, they're going to play three out of the last four games are going to be in division games. So they get the Bills at the Bills in December, which is a tough game. But then they get the Packers at home. They go to the Pats, and then they get the Jets at home. So a fairly manageable ride into the playoffs. Um, and in between, it's not easy, but it's not difficult because they have the Browns after the Bears this week, coming off a big win for them as
Hmm.
they start to generate momentum. But then it's the Texans at the Niners and then at the Chargers, which is a tough back to back. And they do get three games on the road in a row, at two of them on the West Coast. So
Yeah.
that makes it difficult. But I think if
Also,
they
also of note, if I can interject here, Raheem Mostert still is the starting running back for Miami. So it's not like Wilson is coming in to take the number one spot. He's really coming in to take the number two spot and be the running back by committee ish. Although he is
Yes,
certainly
but
not
it
as many
but it just
carries as
adds
you'd like.
another guy that they have to watch out for. And Jeff Wilson, even when Mostert was in San Francisco, did eventually take over snaps from him towards the end of last year. So there's a possibility that happens again. And it's just
Yeah.
again, it's just another guy in the stable of running backs there. But I think if Miami gets it going here against the Bears, Browns, and Texans, and they can stay healthy heading into that 3 game stretch against the Niners, the Chargers, and the Bills all on the road and they come out of that with some confidence, they could be a very dangerous team. So I think this trade, if it helps them round them out and get them back to the way they were playing at the beginning of the season, could be huge for them.
Yeah, I don't hate that. Last bit of news for the trade deadlines is the Chicago Bears acquire Chase Claypool. Now, this is of note for two reasons. One, if you've been watching the Bears play lately, Justin Fields, objectively over the past 2 games, especially last week at the Cowboys, has looked pretty darn good. At the Patriots, he had threw for 179 yards, but had a 61% completion percentage. His rating was okay, not bad. But then last week at the Cowboys, had a 74% completion percentage, 151 yards, 2 TDs, no interception, and a perfect QB rating um,
Yeah, tough weather
at
game up in New
120.
England. That
Yeah, and he certainly has progressed significantly as it turns out. Running with your mobile quarterback and having him spread out a little bit is good for him because it opens up the field to play a little bit. And now the Bears have acquired Chase Claypool to get him a weapon or additional weapon, so that he can start to kind of spread out a little bit and um, you know, show maybe that he's the guy for the Bears because I think that's been a huge point of contention over the past week. The other reason I bring up this trade, not because the Bears are particularly a team that's going to make a deep run in the playoffs, is because it's rumored that Chase Claypool was actually supposed to go to the Packers. The Bears stepped in, made a better offer at the 11th hour, supposedly. So I mention that because one, it's a rumor, but two, it's very funny to think that the Bears hate the Packers so much, who, by the way, didn't acquire any big names. That they would step in and steal Chase Claypool from them in the last in the last hour, which I found very funny. But do you think do you like what the Bears have done? Because the Bears have really been huge sellers in the past couple weeks.
I this is a interesting move for the Bears in that they are going to have to eat this trade from a fan base perspective for probably the rest of up until opening day of next season. Now, let me get through this point. So, when you look at it on its face, they just traded away Roquan Smith, who not only, like we said, is the best, maybe the best off-ball linebacker in football, but was one of their most popular player and a homegrown draft pick guy that they pissed off and then traded away. And they traded him away for a second round pick from the Ravens, and then they traded away a second round pick they owned from the Steelers, a team that's bad, to get Chase Claypool. Or sorry, they traded their own second round pick to the Steelers to get Chase Claypool. The Bears pick is going to be in a better spot than the Ravens pick will be. So they basically swapped second round picks with a team that's better than them to dump Roquan and get Chase Claypool, who's only under contract for another season, I believe, before he can be a free agent. So, and you add on the fact that the having to learn a new offense and develop chemistry with Justin Fields in the middle of the season means
With a
that
team who objectively has not been throwing the ball very well,
yes,
aside from how there's two disconnected arguments here. One, Justin Fields is playing very well and throwing the ball accurately very well. The other argument is that uh, holistically this year the Bears have not had a good passing offense.
no. So when you add all that up, you say this doesn't look good and won't look good on the field for the rest of this year. And I think if you're a rational Bears fan, you have to say that's okay. Because this isn't a move for this year. This is a move to start building a foundation, shifting the focus of the organization from a team that's built well defensively, but is just completely dysfunctional offensively, to a team that can compete on both sides of the football. And I think particularly when you look at this upcoming draft class for wide receivers, it's not nearly as strong as it's been the past couple of years. There's some really talented guys, but coming out of some unproven schools, I think TCU has a really great wide receiver prospect whose name I'm blanking on right now. Tulsa, same thing. So when you add those factors in, and Jordan Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba are good, but they'll go in the first round. So when you add those two things in, where the Bears really need help is to stabilize the offensive line and then get Justin Fields weapons if he's ever going to actually succeed in a meaningful way to get them back to the playoffs. And they can't do that without additional picks. Now, those picks are late round picks based on what they traded Quinn and Roquan Smith for, because the second rounder they trade is a swap essentially for Claypool. But if you think that Chase Claypool can be who he was as a rookie, you're getting him at the cost of a second round pick. Um, for a guy, and really it's almost negligible because you had to dump Roquan anyway. So you take the second rounder you got from him, flip it to get Claypool, net zero, but you get Claypool for basically nothing. So if you look at it that way, Ryan Poles knows that he has to start accumulating talent for Justin Fields if he's ever going to succeed, and if they believe he's the guy, you got to do it quickly. So I like what they're doing, but I think that in order for it to really work, the fan base is going to have to be really patient with the way that they build this roster, and that's not going to be fun. But the Bears have sucked for so long. I think they have no choice but to go with it, and I think that helps Ryan Poles in this case because he's going to get a little bit more rope as long as the fans can still see the vision, and the vision is there with these moves. So I think it's good. Ultimately, I think it's going to be rough to start when Chase Claypool is not succeeding the way everybody thought, and the fan base is going to start to ask why they gave up Roquan Smith essentially for this guy who's not contributing.
I think that's fair. I think they're aware that Roquan wasn't looking to resign, so that'll be interesting to see. Okay, so let's move on to this week's slate of games of note. Two things: one, there's only two 4 o'clock games, so that sucks. And two, there's only two 4 o'clock games, which sucks because the Browns, the Cowboys, the Broncos, the Giants, the Steelers, and the 49ers, 6 teams, are on bye week this week. So a lot of football not being played, which is why we have a shortage of games in the late evening slate before Sunday Night Football. But let's get into it. First game of the week, Eagles at Texans. Eagles in Thursday Night Football are 14-point favorites. Over under is 45.5. I don't have any pick for this game, although I certainly am going to take the under. So maybe I just negated what I said there. I'm going to take the under 45.5. Mike, do you have anything different? Anything else for this one?
No, I will probably. I'm gonna ride with the under as well. That's the only pick I'm gonna add here. I like Philly. I really do. I like, especially in this spot. They're coming off of. Oh no, they aren't coming off a bye. It's a short week for them. I think they had their bye week the week before. Um, they are. It's a short week for them, but they are the much better team here. I get that they're on the road. Houston has showed no life. That's an entire city focused on the World Series right now, and
Yeah, that's not unfair to say.
and and Philly should go in and dominate this game. The only thing that gives me pause is the way that they played on the road at Arizona earlier. But Arizona is a much better team than Houston is. I think Philly probably wins this game really, really easily. I think it's probably like a 21-28 point sort of drubbing. I'm just not going to take it. I think the better pick is the under because I just don't see how Houston really scores in a meaningful way, and I don't think Philly puts up 45 on their own. So
Yes.
I think that's the logic there, and I agree with it.
So this is if I was a Texans fan, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to me is have a primetime game in Houston where objectively there's going to be 100 billion Eagles fans because a shit ton of them came to Houston to root for the Phillies against the Astros because the tickets were cheaper here, and a lot of them are genuinely staying here for weeks on end to watch the World Series in
Yeah, if they
Houston
go
rather
down
than in
for this
Philly.
game on Thursday, the swing comes back to Houston for Game 6 on Saturday.
Sunday. It should be Sunday. No, it might be. Yeah, it's still Saturday because they
Yeah,
didn't adjust based on the rain out. So yeah, this is going to be the worst thing that ever happened to Texans fans, especially if they're Astros fans as well. So I do lean Philly just because they travel well, and when they travel, they're all fucking the worst human beings on earth. But I do like the under here. 45 is a lot for a primetime game. Somehow this line has moved up, even with like 50 or I'm sorry, I'm looking at it. It's 87% of the money according to Action App is on the under here. So I'm going to go with the under. I think it's a good bet. These unders have been hitting in prime time like crazy, unless you think the Phillies are going to put up 42. Um, I think the under is a relatively safe bet. They could. They very well could, but we'll see. Um, Moving on to our 1 p.m. slate. In no particular order, we have Vikings at Commanders. Commanders are 3.5-point underdogs at home. Panthers at Bengals. Bengals are 7.5-point favorites at home. 7 to 7.5. It's kind of in that medium right now. That's changing back and forth. Bills at Jets in an interconference matchup. where the Jets are underdogs by 12.5 points. Colts at Patriots opened as a pick 'em. Colts are now plus 5.5. Raiders at Jaguars. Raiders are anywhere from -1.5 to -2. Dolphins at Bears. Bears are 5-point underdogs at home. Packers at Lions. Packers are 4-point underdogs at home. And Chargers at Falcons, where the Falcons are 3.5-point underdogs at home. Mike, what do you like in this 1 p.m. slate? Run me through it.
I've got 3 plays that I'll put in Virginia and not in North Carolina because sports betting is illegal. But for this week in the 1 o'clock window, I've, like I said, 3 plays, all totals. Um,
Hmm.
so buckle up. Chargers Atlanta over 49.5. This Chargers are coming off a bye. Falcons offense has been good. Their defense hasn't been good. They play these games competitive at home. You only need both teams to get to roughly 24, 27, 24, get you over the number. Um, the Chargers keep playing high scoring games. Their defense has been really banged up. Herbert finally had time to rest his definitely broken, 100% broken ribs. They come out. I think they get Keenan Allen back this week finally. Um, and you add that up. I think as the Chargers start to get healthy, they play pretty well. The Falcons will be competitive. They should get Cordero Patterson back this week, so their offense should be a little bit better. Add those two in, and you get over 49.5. I like that number. I'm going to take the Jets, Bills under 47. As a Jets fan, I'm not hopeful that the Jets win this game. I think Zach Wilson is under a ton of heat. And I don't think that forces him to press and make more mistakes, but I do think we could see a very Josh Rosen stat line out of him this week, like an 8 for 20 with 100 yards, but no turnovers and no touchdowns sort of game. And there's a chance that the Jets lose this game like 25-3, like a drubbing, but in a where the Bills just sort of suffocate the Jets offense that is incredibly injured on the offensive line, and then the Bills don't really put up a ton of points because they just don't need to. So I think the under here is the play. Vegas agrees with me here. The under is 96% of the tickets, while the over has, or sorry, under 96% of the cash, over has 67% of the tickets. That's about as far a disparity as you can get. Take the Jets Buffalo under. Last one. This one's nuts, and I'm going to play it. It's crazy, but I'll get to the logic of why. Indy, New England under 39.5. Incredibly low total, but Indy doesn't know who's starting at quarterback, and even if they did, I'm not confident that that person is going to put up points. Matthew Judon has been a terror this year, and the 2 games that I've watched him play, he was all over Justin Fields and was all over Zach Wilson last week. And then on the flip side, New England wasn't particularly impressive offensively against the Jets. The Jets kept turning the ball over, and New England kept kicking field goals. They only scored 2 offensive touchdowns, so when you add all that up, I think that this game, even at 39.5, this game should go under. And the thing here is the cash is in 99% on the under. And what did we say last week? Green Bay Buffalo under 99% of the cash was on the Green Bay Buffalo under. And guess what? It hit. So I'm going to ride with Vegas again. I'm going to ride Indy, New England under 39.5.
I like it. I like it. I have a couple plays for this week. So 1 p.m. slate, I have Washington plus 3.5. A large portion of the money is on the Commanders, who opened as a pick'em and fell to 3.5 over the course of the week. Kirk Cousins doesn't handle pressure well, and the Washington defensive line is probably one of the best in the league. We've said it before. I know I'm a Commanders fan, so I'm biased. But that combined with Cousins going back to Washington, there's always that storyline. I think Washington can pull out at least a cover. I think they very very well may win. Um, they are kind of trending in like a positive manner. Um, so we'll see how they kind of come in there and play. Of note, they activated. Um, oh my god, um, I can't believe no, not Allen. Jesus Christ, Mike, help me out. Defensive end, first round pick, second round pick.
Chase Young.
Yes, thank you. Chase Young has been activated as of today. I can't believe I was blanking on that name. And he very well may not play this week. He has 21 days after today to. Well, he was activated off the IR last week, so he has another 14 days to get on the field, or they have to put him on IR for the rest of the year. So he will certainly get on the off the bowl there and start playing, but I think that'll happen next week. But still, there's a possibility he plays. Either way, Cousins doesn't handle pressure well. I also like the under in this game. I'm not going to play it, but I think he'll struggle as we go on. Bengals -7 in a bounce back against the Panthers at home. This is one of those ones the Bengals are just going to steamroll the Panthers. Bills Jets over 46.5. Jets have been scoring a lot. Bills obviously scoring a lot. Obviously, the Bills' defense is pretty good. I know usually these interconference or interdivisional matchups are underplays. I kind of like the over. I just think New York is not going to have shitty weather, or it's not projected to at least this week. It's supposed to be 75, 75 degrees and sunny, so it'll be a good game for passing. I think the Jets and Bills both put up points. Colts +5.5. I'm just going to kind of take them with the points. They opened to pick them. Patriots didn't impress me except for last week against the Jets, so we'll see how that goes. But you know, it Bill has a way with crushing the Jets, even if he's doing terrible all year. So I don't take that into account too much. I have Raiders -1.5 against the Jags. The Raiders, I don't know why they're not 3-point favorites. That's where they opened. A lot of people have been betting on the Jags coming off that Sunday early morning win or loss rather against the Vikings in Europe. Typically, teams coming back from Europe do not play well. So I have the Jags not winning this game by a decent bit, which I'll talk about later. And then I have Chargers -3. Chargers coming off of their bye week, correct?
Chargers are, yeah.
Yes, Chargers coming off the bye week, not having a great game last week, but I think the Falcons are a little overhyped. I think 3 points is more than fair to open up and ask them to win. All right. Um, Normally we talk about the 4 o'clock games and then the Monday and Sunday night football. I'm just going to give them an order here. The first two will be Thursday afternoon, or I'm sorry, the Sunday afternoon games. The next two will be the Sunday night football and then Monday night football in order. So we have Seahawks at Cardinals, 3:05 kickoff. Seahawks are +2, heavily bet by both the public money and the amount of money is on the Seahawks. Rams at Bucks. Bucks are -3 at home in the 3:25 kickoff, and then we have Sunday night football. Titans at Chiefs. Chiefs are -13. And then Ravens at Saints, where the Ravens are 2-point favorites in NOLA in the Superdome. Michael, go ahead, give me your picks.
So I've got 3 for the rest of the slate. I'm gonna take Seattle +2. I know they're going to Arizona. I know the public is all over them. I don't care. Seattle's the better team. They've played like the better team. They're playing with a ton of confidence. Their defense has been great the past 3 weeks. I really like Seattle +2 here. I don't think it's necessarily an indictment on the Cardinals. I just think Seattle's been the better team. And then I've got 2 plays on the Monday night game. Baltimore -2.5. This one isn't based on the Vegas inverse ratio logic. It's just more a gut and eyeball test. Public and cash are exactly both slightly on New Orleans because they're the underdog at home. I think New Orleans is not a good team. I don't think they're a good team offensively. I think Baltimore is a very good team, and I think that they are starting to not blow leads in the fourth quarter. I think Baltimore is going to be a legit contender in the AFC. I think
Oh, I
they
do
run
too.
the ball well enough to stay out of a very dangerous game script against a good defense that's playing them at home. Um, and I think that they should win this game fairly easily. I think they win it by at least a touchdown. I'm also going to take the under here, under 48. The way they win this game is running the ball, controlling the clock, playing decent defense against a really bad offense, and scoring when they need to. I think this game for Baltimore looks similar to the Giants, except they win. That to me points to the under. 48 is a lot of points, especially for a New Orleans Saints offense that just doesn't impress me. They have scored at times, even with like Taysom Hill at quarterback, but they're still starting Andy Dalton, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm taking
In
the
prime
under.
time.
Yeah,
I
taking
believe
the
Andy
under.
Dalton has never won in prime time, if
Yeah,
I'm not mistaken.
I don't know. That feels like it's almost an impossible stat, but
No, he's like
uh,
0-11 in primetime
Jesus.
games. I swear I
Yeah,
saw that.
I'm gonna take Baltimore and the under in that Monday night game. Those are my three plays.
I got a couple plays for this evening, afternoon slate. I'm going to take Rams money line and over 42.5. I hate both these picks, but here's the logic. Uh, everybody is on the Bucks, and somehow the Bucks still look terrible. The Rams are at least coming off a loss where they always lose to a team that they always lose to, and at least can make up for it. Um, None of the money is on the Rams +3, which is why I like them even more money line, which sounds so stupid. And then the over 42, this is like a fade the public kind of thing. Um, all all of these teams like can't score. They both looked anemic, which is why I'm taking the over 42. I think they're going to both have breakout games. So I don't know why. It has to happen where the public just gets demolished in all of their picks, and I think this is the game it could happen. 4% of the money is on the over in the Rams Bucks game. 12% of the money is on Rams +3. So I'm going to take both these and then just see if I'm the smartest man alive or the dumbest man alive. Um, Titans Chiefs. I like Titans +13. It's tractor seat toe season on Sunday night. I think it'll show. It's going to drop down about 50 degrees at night. A little bit of wind. Covering 2 touchdowns is a lot, and I also actually like the over in this game, over 46. I think both these teams can score. I think the Titans, for all their misgivings, are actually like not a bad team. I could see them as a 7th seed in the playoffs coming up. Um, of note, uh, they've had five wins in a row, so that's not bad. I think there's not a lot of respect put on their name right now. I know that seems silly going against Patrick Mahomes, but 2 touchdowns is a lot for even the worst team playing the best team, and the Titans are not the worst team in the league, so I don't see them covering. I don't see the Chiefs covering at home. This is one of those games where everyone's going to think the Chiefs are going to win by a zillion points, and then it might be closer to like a shootout. And then Sunday night, I have under 48 and the Ravens money line. I like those both. I don't see how these teams score combined 48 points, mostly because I don't see how the Saints score anywhere between 7 and 10 points. So I agree with your assessment on both of those. I like the Ravens heavily, and I like the under heavily. I also have a teaser for you. There's a 1 p.m. home team underdog teaser. So there's 6 teams in the 1 p.m. slate that are underdogs at home. Washington, Jets, Jags, Bears, Lions, Falcons. I said I was going back to the Raiders -1.5. This is a 13-point teaser with 6 teams plus 120. I'm going to put 2 units on it. I think all these teams don't get blown out. The lowest one of these teams can lose by in a 13-point teaser is they can lose by 2 touchdowns and still cover. So with the amount of teams that are home dogs this week, I'm just going to bet the home dogs and see how it works out. Most of my picks are leaning that way anyway, so might as well take them. But yeah, those are my picks for the week.
Kind of like it. Kind of
Yeah,
love it.
it's not bad. I am going to hammer the Ravens money line and the Ravens Saints under. Those are just 2 standout games those are like beyond me how those lines are where they are.
Mm.
Mike, you got anything to add?
No, should be a
Well,
fun
hey,
weekend.
yeah, that's been our roundup of week 8 play and then week 9 where we're looking for the NFL season. I'm Mike. That's Alex. Tune in for our college football show released around the same time every week. And we do the show for the NFL. Thanks for watching, like, and subscribe, and have a good day.